Hi, I'm Dr. Charlie Procter with Beltline Health in Atlanta, Georgia, and today's topic is duodenal switch versus SADI, or modified duodenal switch. So these operations are really kind of taking off over the last year or two. More and more now I see patients come into my office and we discuss their traditional operations like sleeve gastrectomy and Roux-en-Y gastric bypass. And formally, most patients would say they'd never heard of the duodenal switch or never heard of a SADI or single anastomosis duodenal ileostomy. Now more and more these operations are becoming mainstream and people are wanting to know more about them. So let's just specifically talk about what is a duodenal switch, who should have that, what are the implications of that operation, and then we'll talk about the modification of that operation called the SADI. So the duodenal switch operation, believe it or not, is the second oldest current running bariatric procedure after the gastric bypass. It was first developed starting around the 1960s, where it was a operation similar to a sleeve gastrectomy, then with adding to that an intestinal bypass like the gastric bypass, but actually bypassing even more of the small bowel, so a little bit more aggressive with that. The thought behind this was that we would get this metabolic kick from the sleeve gastrectomy, which also would cause some restriction, but would also greatly shorten the amount of small bowel, which is where all the absorption takes place. So as the food leaves the stomach, it goes to the small intestine. That's where you absorb your nutrients, and the longer the tract, the more you're going to absorb. So if we shorten that tract somewhat, you would absorb less. So the anatomy of a duodenal switch is a sleeve gastrectomy, so removing about 75 to 85% of the stomach, leaving the patient with a long, narrow tube of a stomach. Then dividing the small bowel right past the stomach, dividing the small bowel about halfway down and bringing the second half up and sewing to the stomach. So food comes through the stomach, down the second half of the small bowel. The other end of the small bowel that's carrying the digestive enzymes then get plugged in about a meter or so from the end of the small bowel. And what that creates is a situation where the digestive enzymes that help you absorb dietary fat are only there in a very short segment. So the overall effect of that is your body can't absorb dietary fats very well, which is a good thing, but it also means your body can't absorb fat-soluble vitamins very well. Your fat-soluble vitamins being A, D, E, and K. So that's a bad thing. Every operation carries with it a risk-benefit profile. In my mind, for those patients who have very high body mass indices, so BMI of 55, BMI higher than 60 for sure, it is worth the risk of that operation, the risk of downstream metabolic issues that can occur, because generally they're correctable, in order to have more aggressive operation that's going to allow that patient to get down to a safe body mass index. Because unless that patient loses weight, their early mortality is very, very high. So it's worth undertaking the issue with malabsorption to get the patient's weight down to where it needs to be. But this operation wasn't perfect for everybody. There's certain people with pre-existing illnesses or certain ages that you would feel unsafe doing this particular operation. So recently we've come up with a modification of this operation that maybe makes it a little bit safer, and that's called the SADI. SADI is interesting in that it's almost the exact same thing with one very important difference. We still do the sleeve gastrectomy. We still have a very short, narrow tube of stomach for the patient. We still divide the small bowel right after the stomach. We still find that mid portion of the small bowel and we bring it up and we sew it to the end of the stomach. But we leave it as a loop of bowel. So on one end, you've got the digestive enzymes coming around. Those digestive enzymes then meet the food as soon as it leaves the stomach and then are mixing with the food the rest of the way down that limb. So mixing for about 3 meters rather than just 1 meter. What that does is increases your body's absorption of fat-soluble vitamins, so we don't see the deficiencies as much as we would down the road. We may be sacrificing a little bit of weight loss for less malabsorption, which in most cases is a pretty good trade-off. So It's an operation that I think you're going to see more and more of. The biggest issue with it right now in September of 2022 is only about half the insurance companies here in Georgia are covering it. I think you're going to see more cover it later on down the road. In my mind, this might be an operation that we see as a mainstay operation even more than the gastric bypass in the future. So we'll see what happens down the road, but that's a difference between a duodenal switch and a SADI in a nutshell. My name is Dr. Charlie Procter, and I'm with Beltline Health here in Atlanta, Georgia. Please feel free to like us or subscribe to us on YouTube. If you're interested in getting an appointment with our practice, you can look us up at www.beltlinehealth.com, or you can give us a ring at 470-419-4380.